As my co authors Arthur Laffer and Stephen Moore and I have covered for now 15 years in our publication Rich States, Poor States, the ALEC Laffer State Economic Competitiveness Index, not all tax plans are created equally. And as a few recent proposals show, not even the bad tax plans are created equally. While states all across America are moving to reduce their tax rates and become flat tax states or looking to even eliminate their income taxes in an effort to become more competitive for job creation and growth, a group of 8 states, California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Minnesota, New York, and Washington, let's call them a Poor State Alliance, has emerged and is looking to move radically in the other direction. They have picked up where Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren left off at the federal level and recently announced legislation that would implement a wealth tax, as if those states aren't hemorrhaging enough residents already. You may remember that Senators Sanders and Warren proposed a federal wealth tax while running for president in 2020 for the Democrat nomination. The proposal ended up being part of President Joe Biden's failed Build Back Better plan in the fall of 2021. And the U.S. Finance Committee had introduced a plan in the Senate for a wealth tax on taxpayers with more than $100 million in annual income or more than $1 billion in assets for 3 consecutive years. But the plan was ultimately scrapped as West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin decided not to support the so-called Build Back Better plan. And the proposal didn't rear its ugly head again when the budget negotiations resumed in 2022. Now, the wealth tax is dubious for many reasons, starting with the very nature of what it taxes. A wealth tax is a tax on the appreciation of assets, both tangible and intangible, and accumulation of those assets, meaning property and stocks. That means that any increase in the value of assets is subject to taxation without a transaction or realization occurring. Proponents tout the wealth tax as a tax on income, thereby justifying it at the federal level, at least under the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. However, this is an egregious misinterpretation of the word, as quote-unquote income is received as a result of realization. In the early days of the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, over 100 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the notion that income needed to be realized in order to be taxed. But since when has the Constitution been a deterrent to the progressive left? It surely isn't for this Poor State Alliance, as several of the plans in these states are either a violation of the United States Constitution or of their own constitutions in those states, or maybe both. California not only wants to tax wealthy households, but they want to keep paying the piper through an unconstitutional exit tax, long after they followed more than 300,000 other Americans who have fled the state over the last 12 months alone. Think about that for a minute. Now, there's Washington State. The Emerald State's Constitution explicitly prohibits graduated taxes on property, which is defined to include everything, whether tangible or intangible, subject to ownership. The wealth tax would be a flagrant violation of this provision. What's more is that the state isn't even finished with this legal fight over the constitutionality of the recently passed capital gains tax, which hinges on the very same provision. Perhaps someone in Olympia ought to deliver a copy of the state constitution to the lawmakers proposing these egregious taxes. Constitutional permissibility aside, the wealth tax also creates a logistical nightmare for tax implementation and collection, and any revenue projections would inevitably be wildly inaccurate. Asset values, especially stock values, are naturally volatile, as anyone with an IRA or 401k has witnessed in recent months. One could really result in appreciation in 1 year depreciation. There's virtually no reliability in revenue collection at that point. Furthermore, the lack of realization creates a payment problem for the taxpayer. The taxman demands money, so pay up, and taxpayers will either have to pay out of pocket with cash flow or cash in their capital gains, a process that will then likely subject them to even more taxation through the capital gains tax. No matter how you look at it, the wealth tax is a killer of prosperity, as it disincentivizes investment with prejudice. The members of this poor state alliance are already seeing a mass exodus of Americans looking for economic freedom and prosperity in states like Florida, Texas, and North Carolina, just to name a few. The very last thing they need is a tax that's going to drive more of their economy out of state. But alas, it looks like that'll be the first thing they do if progressives continue to push for this killer of a wealth tax. For more information on what sets apart rich states versus poor states, go to richstatespoorstates.org. For American Radio Journal, I'm Jonathan Williams. Thanks for listening.